The instrument was already lying, and Neff did not yet know it was the instrument telling the truth. He stood at the foot of the loom cradle with the reader plate held flat against his lower palms, watching the human's chest close a wound that no one had signed. The graft was 9 minutes old. 9 minutes was nothing. 9 minutes was the span in which a fresh seedline infusion was supposed to sit inert and cold in the wound bed, waiting for a canter to reach into it and begin the slow work of telling each cell what it was permitted to become. Seedline did nothing on its own. That was the first law a novice learned in the cantery before he learned to hold a stylus, before he learned the shape of his own throat node in a mirror. Seedline was clay. A canter was the hand. Without the hand, clay stayed clay. The reader plate said the clay was moving. "Warden," Neff said. He kept his voice at the register the hall used for small corrections. "The lower thoracic tier, it's knitting." Warden Cantor Vesuth did not look up from the ledger column suspended above the human's hip, where the amber light of the concordance held a single unsigned line, blinking, waiting for her authority. "It is settling," she said. "Seedline settles into a wound bed. You have seen it 100 times. It's not settling, it's contracting the margins. There's fibrin lattice across the tier and it's oriented." Neff turned the plate so she could see the cross-section if she chose to. "Oriented, Warden, along the load line." Now she looked. The human lay on the cradle the way all salvage cases lay, which was to say badly, half her body still the color of a thing that had been decompressed, and then repressurized too fast. A deckhand pulled out of a hulled cargo hauler 11 hours after the hull failed, past the window in which any Alethi client would have been mourned rather than treated. She had come in with 4 wounds that should have been mortal in series, and a core temperature that the intake cantor had recorded twice because he did not believe it the first time. The wardship took her because the wardship took Rex. Salvage medicine was what the station at Orek did, the reclaiming of the almost dead for a fee paid by whatever registry on the wreck. They had infused the seedline expecting to spend the next 40 hours conducting a rebuild, wound by wound, a slow, careful piece of work that Vesuth would sign in stages and bill in stages. They had not begun conducting. There had been no time to begin. The intake was still logging her registry number when the reader plate first flickered. "Instrument echo," Vesuth said, and the words came out of her by reflex, the way a hand closes when something drops toward it. "The plate is reading the infusion current as motion. Recalibrate it against the cradle baseline and give me a clean line." Neff recalibrated it. He did it properly because he was careful, and because a junior cantor who argued with a warden over an instrument had better be certain the instrument was not simply dirty. He wiped the contact face, seated it against the baseline node at the head of the cradle, let the concordance draw a null reference, and set the plate back against the human sternum. The line came up clean. The clean line said the tier was 90% closed, and that the closure was accelerating. For a moment neither of them spoke. In the quiet Neff could hear the hall doing what the hall always did, the low chord of the conduction field, the soft percussion of the fluid pumps, the sound of a place built to hold dying bodies still while other bodies decided what they would become. He had worked in that sound for 6 years, and he had never once heard it and felt cold. He felt cold now, and he could not have said why, only that some animal register beneath his training had read the instrument before his mind did, and had drawn a conclusion his mind was not yet allowed to draw. "Sign nothing," Vesuth said. That was the correct instruction. Neff understood it. If the graft was expressing without conduction, then the ledger below the human's hip held a line of growth that no cantor had authored, and to sign an unauthored line was to claim it, and a warden did not claim work she had not done. The ledger was the spine of everything. Every change a body underwent inside the wardship was written into it, each entry countersigned by the cantor who had conducted the change, so that at any moment one could open a client's column, and read exactly who had made them what they were and in what order and by whose permission. It was law and it was theology, and it was the reason the Illith had survived their own biology for 11,000 years. Their cells did not grow without a hand. When a hand was withdrawn, growth stopped. When growth continued without a hand, it had a name, and the name was the oldest fear the species owned, and no one in the hall was going to say it while there was any chance the instrument was merely dirty. The instrument was not dirty. 2 more entries, Neff said, because the ledger had just added them, 2 amber lines stacking beneath the first, unsigned, blinking. Warden, the ledger is logging them faster than I can read the plate. The ledger logs expression, Vesoth said. It does not care who authored it. That is the ledger's flaw, not the graft's. But she had come around the cradle now, and she was holding her own reader against the human's throat, against the flat, unremarkable throat of a species that had no cantor note at all, no organ of direction, nothing that a halt signal could reach. And Neff watched the warden's face do the small collapse of a professional discovering that a familiar tool had no purchase on the problem in front of her. The human opened her eyes. She did it without ceremony. One moment she was a body on a cradle, and the next she was a person looking at the ceiling of the graft hall, at the suspended cord of light, at the 2 tall amber shapes bent over her, and she took this in the way a person takes in a room they have decided in advance not to be afraid of. Her eyes moved. They found Vesoth, found Neff, found the ledger column glowing at her hip, and stopped there for a moment as if she could read it, which she could not, because it was written in a script her species had encountered 11 hours ago. "You're not the ship," she said. Her voice was rough from the tube they had drawn out of her throat. "Different sealing." "You are aboard the reclamation station Aurecht," Vesoth said. The translator carried her concordance tongue into the flat trade speech the human's wreck had been squawking. "You were recovered from a hulled vessel. Your injuries were extensive. We have infused a repair medium and we are—" She stopped. Neff understood why she stopped. The next clause was "We are conducting your rebuild," and it was not true, and Vesoth did not lie to clients. It was one of the few virtues Neff would have staked his own column on. "We are attending your rebuild," she finished. "Okay," the human said. "Not what did you put in me. Not am I going to live. Not where is my crew," though her crew was a matter Neff had already read in the intake and would have given a great deal not to have to answer. She said okay, and she let her head settle back against the cradle, and she breathed, and the reader plate against her sternum reported that with each breath the intercostal repair was laying down muscle in a pattern the seedline library did not contain. "Warden," Neff said, very quietly now in the cancery register that did not carry past the cradle. "That pattern, it isn't in the library." "I can see that it isn't in the library." "Then where is it coming from?" Vesoth straightened. She was old, older than the hall, a warden who had conducted 40,000 rebuilds and signed 40,000 columns and had, Neff knew, twice been offered an overwarden seat, and twice refused it because she preferred the cradle to the quorum. She was not a fool and she was not a coward, and Neff had come to Aurecht specifically to stand at her elbow and learn the thing she did, which was the patient reading of a body 1 cell at a time. He watched her look at the human, and he watched her arrive, ahead of him, at the sentence he was still assembling. "It's coming from her," Vesoth said. The human's name in the intake was Reese Calloway. She was, by the registry's own record, 22 of her world's years, a rating aboard a mid-tonnage hauler working the salvage lanes. Unmarried, no dependents, no augment history, no medical flags beyond a childhood fracture long healed. She was, in every way the wardship measured a client, unremarkable, small for the haul, a head shorter than the shortest canter, thin the way the young of hard labor species were thin, with the scarring and the sun marks and the flat unimpressed manner of someone who had spent her short life around machinery that would kill her if she stopped paying attention. There was nothing in the record that explained the reader plate. There was nothing in the record that could. "Play me the seedline manifest," Vesoth said, and the concordance unfolded it in the air above the cradle, the long shimmering index of everything the infused medium was permitted to become, every tissue the wardship had ever licensed, ordered and priced and locked behind the cantor's hand. It was premium stock. Neff noted that without meaning to. Salvage cases got salvage seedline, but the intake had drawn from the sable reserve, the good clay, because the human had come in so far past the window that the intake cantor had assumed she would need every advantage the medium could offer, or she would not survive the hour. A costly assumption. The wardship would bill the Rex registry for it, and the registry would refuse, and the cost would sit in Vesuth's column as a loss. The manifest turned in the light. Against it, the reader plate laid the human's expression, what her tissue was actually doing, and the two did not match. They diverged. The seedline offered 900 licensed tissues, and the human's body was using perhaps 40 of them, and building the rest itself, drawing the medium apart into its constituent parts, and reassembling those parts into structures that were not on the manifest, that were not licensed, that were not anywhere, oriented along load lines and thermal gradients and pressure differentials that the human's body was reading off the station itself and answering. She's not accepting the graft, Neff said. She's using it as material. Yes. That's not possible. Seedline requires a conductor, yes. Vesuth's throat note had dimmed to the low ember of a cantor thinking against the grain of everything she knew. It requires a conductor. There is a conductor. There's no node. I read her throat. There's no node anywhere. I checked the whole neural line. There is no node, Vesuth agreed. And there is a conductor. She looked down at Reese Calloway, who was watching them talk over her with the mild attention of a passenger listening to two mechanics discuss an engine, understanding none of the words and most of the tone. Her species does not conduct from an organ. Her species conducts from everywhere. Every cell she owns already knows how to direct the cell beside it. That is how her kind heals a cut without a hand. That is how they grow at all. We infused a repair medium into a body that has spent 100,000 generations learning to command tissue without permission, and the body has done to our seedline what it does to everything. It has taken command. Neff looked at the ledger. It had added 4 more lines while she spoke. Then it will stop, he said. He heard the hope in his own voice and disliked it. Unconducted growth doesn't hold. It runs and it tangles and it becomes the thing it becomes. It doesn't build. It can't build. It has no plan. No, Vesuth said, it has no plan. So it will fail. It will overrun the wound bed and tangle and will have to reclaim the medium before it. Read the plate, Neff. He read the plate. The plate said the wound bed was closed. All 4 wounds, the ones that should have taken 40 hours of careful conduction, were closed, cleanly, without a single margin of the wild, disordered overgrowth that unconducted expression always produced. The fibrin was oriented. The muscle was laid to load. The repaired tissue was not merely healed but was, in 2 places the reader could already measure, denser than the tissue it had replaced, tuned as if the body had noted the failure that had nearly killed it and had elected, quietly, not to be that fragile again. It had a plan. That was the word Neff could not make fit and could not make leave. Unconducted growth had no plan. That was the whole horror of it. The reason a species that could not stop its own cells from growing had built a civilization out of learning to command them. A body left to itself did not improve. It metastasized. It became a chaos wearing your shape. And the body on the cradle had been left entirely to itself for 9 minutes, and then 18, and then 30, and it had not become a chaos. It had become better than it was. Warden, Neff said, what do I sign? It was the practical question, the junior's question, the only question his training gave him for a ledger full of unsigned lines. Every entry needed a hand. The ledger would hold them blinking for a while, and then it would flag the column as uncountersigned, and the flag would go up the chain to the overwardens. And an uncountersigned column was a small scandal. a sign of a hall out of control of its own work, and the flag would land on Vesuth. "You sign nothing," Vesuth said for the second time. "I sign nothing. There is nothing here that a cantor did. To sign it is to claim we conducted it, and we did not conduct it, and I will not put my hand to a lie in the concordance to spare myself a flag." She was quiet for a moment. "Log the column as observed only. Note the divergence. Note the time. They'll ask who's conducting. Tell them the truth." "The truth is that no one is conducting," Neff said, "and the graft is expressing anyway, and it's building to plan, and I don't." He stopped, because the human was looking at him. "I don't have a word for that, Warden. There isn't a word for that." "There is a word for that," Vesuth said. She did not say it. Neff was grateful, in a way he would only understand later, that she did not say it in the hall with the human listening, because the word was the oldest fear the Illith owned, and it was the wrong word. And if she had said it then, in the 9th minute, the whole hall would have arranged itself around the wrong word, and everything that followed would have been the management of a horror instead of the reading of a fact. Vesuth did not say the word. She was a better cantor than that. She set her own reader down on the cradle rail, and she leaned over the human, and she spoke to her in the trade tongue slowly, in the register the hall reserved for telling a client something true. "Reese Calloway," she said, "the medium we placed in you, can you feel it?" The human considered the question. She was, Neff would come to understand, always considering the question. There was a deliberateness to her that read in an Ilithi frame as either great stupidity or great control, and it was not stupidity. She lifted one hand, the arm that 11 hours ago had been crushed, and she turned it in the light, and she flexed the fingers, and she watched them work. "Yeah," she said, "it's warm down deep, like a muscle after you've worked it." She lowered the hand. "It's doing something in my chest, little at a time. It doesn't hurt." She looked at Vesuth with those flat, unbothered eyes. "It feels like it's fixing me. Is it fixing me?" "Yes," Vesuth said. "Good," said Reese Calloway, and closed her eyes, and let the graph she was conducting without an organ, without a hand, without a plan the manifest could name, and with a plan the reader could measure, go on quietly rebuilding her into something the Sable Reserve had never been licensed to make. Neff stood at the foot of the cradle with the plate in his hands and watched the ledger add a 9th line, and a 10th, and understood, in the cold animal register beneath his training, that the instrument had never been lying. It had been the only thing in the hall telling the truth. The human was doing the impossible thing quietly and without effort, and without any apparent interest in whether it was impossible, and the warship was going to spend the next several days discovering, one instrument at a time, that everything it knew about who was permitted to build a body had been a local rule mistaken for a law of the universe, a rule that held everywhere the Illith had ever been, and did not hold here on this cradle. In this small, unremarkable person, who had said okay and gone back to sleep. He logged the column as observed only, he noted the divergence, he noted the time. Then he stood in the sound of the hall, the cord and the pumps, and the soft machinery of a place built to hold the dying still, and he watched a body that no hand was conducting conduct itself. And for the first time in 6 years, he was cold in the one place his training had promised him he would never be cold, which was the certainty that clay stayed clay until a cantor lifted it. The clay had lifted itself. Somewhere above the hall, in the ring of the concordance where the overwardens read the flags that came up from the cradles, a column had just gone amber and stayed amber, uncountersigned, observed only, divergence noted, and Neff knew without being told that the reading of it had already begun, and that the reading would go the wrong way, toward the old word and the old fear, because the Illith had 11,000 years of reasons to fear a body that grew without a hand and no reasons at all, not one. To imagine a body that could be trusted to grow, without a hand, better than they could grow it with one. The human slept. The ledger filled. And Warden Cantor Vesuth, who had conducted 40,000 rebuilds and refused 2 seats among the overwardens, stood over the small sleeping salvage case with her throat node dimmed to almost nothing and said, to no one, in the register the hall used for things that were true and could not be signed. We put the good clay into the wrong world's child, and the child is a potter. By the 4th hour Vesuth had decided to conduct her anyway. Neff understood the decision even before she explained it, because it was the only decision the cantory left her. A body could not simply be permitted to build itself. That was not a thing the wardship did, not because it was forbidden. There was no rule against it, the way there is no rule against breathing water, because no one had ever needed one. But because it was not a thing that had ever been possible, and a hall that watched the impossible happen and did nothing was a hall that had stopped being a hall. If the graft was going to express, then a cantor would take hold of the expression and shape it, and the shaping would go into the ledger under a hand, and the column would close clean and order would be restored. That was the theory. Vesuth did not believe the theory. She tried it anyway, because trying it was how she would learn precisely how untrue it was, and Vesuth learned the way she did everything, by putting her hand into the thing and feeling where it resisted. Bring the conduction yoke, she told Neff. Full array. I want every channel on her at once. The yoke was the tool a warden used for the heaviest work, the rebuilds that could not be conducted note by note, because the body was failing faster than a single channel could correct it. It laid the full weight of the cantor's direction across the whole organism, every tissue at once, an instrument for imposing order on a body too far gone to keep its own. Neff had seen Vesuth use it 4 times in 6 years. It was not a thing you brought out for a salvage case with 4 closed wounds and a warm feeling in her chest. He brought it. He seated the array against the human spine and along the long muscles of her back where the conduction coupling was strongest, and Reese Calloway, awake again and sitting up now against the cradle's raised head, watched him do it with her flat attention and asked what it was. It will let the warden guide your repair, Neff said, directly, so that it stays orderly. Is it not orderly? The human asked. Neff did not have a signed answer for that. It's very orderly, he said, which was true and was the problem. Vesuth took up the yoke stylus and set her throat node bright and reached into the graft the way she had reached into 40,000 grafts, and Neff watched her face, because you could always read a warden's contact in her face, the small tension of a hand closing on clay and feeling it yield. He watched her reach. He watched her find the graft. He watched her take hold of it. He watched the graft not yield. It was not that it resisted her. Resistance she would have known what to do with. Resistance was a body in distress fighting its own repair, and a warden broke resistance the way water breaks a fist, by being patient and total. The graft did not resist. It simply did not require her. Vesuth's direction went into the tissue, and the tissue received it the way a master receives a note from an apprentice. It read the instruction, it understood the instruction, and it had, in most cases, already done the thing the instruction asked better, in the breath before the instruction arrived. In the 2 places where Vesuth's direction differed from what the body had chosen, the body considered the warden's version and kept its own. Neff read all of this on the plate. He read the warden's channels going into the graft strong and clean. He read the graft acknowledging them. He read the graft declining them. And he read Vesuth's face while it happened, the face of a cantor who had spent her whole life as the hand that lifts the clay, discovering that she was, for the first time, a voice in a room that had already made up its mind and was listening to her only out of courtesy. She set the stylus down. It heard me, she said. It heard every channel. It corrected me twice. She said this without shame, which Neff would remember, because a lesser warden would have felt the shame and hidden the reading. The intercostal lay I ordered, it was the right lay, the correct lay for an elliptithorax. She rejected it and laid the muscle at a shallower pitch, and I could not understand why until I read the pitch against her skeleton. A pause. Her ribs articulate differently than ours. My lay would have bound. Hers won't. She corrected my conduction against an anatomy I do not have memorized because it is not my anatomy, and she did it in the time it took the channel to reach the tissue. Warden, Neff said. She doesn't know her own rib articulation. She's a deckhand. She couldn't tell you the name of a single bone. She doesn't know it, Veseth agreed. Her body knows it. Her body has known it since before she was born. That is the thing we keep failing to hold in our minds, Neff, because we cannot hold it. Our bodies know nothing. Our bodies are clay. Everything ours becomes we had to teach it, cell by cell, hand by hand, for 11,000 years. Hers was never taught. Hers already knew. We handed a body that already knew a bucket of the finest clay in the reserve, and it is doing what a thing that already knows does when you give it more material. It is making itself more of what it already is. Reese Calloway, against the raised cradle, listened to this in a language she could not understand and watched the two of them the way she watched everything. And then she said, into the pause in the trade tongue, "Something's happening in my ears." They both turned. "What is happening in your ears?" Veseth said. The human worked her jaw, swallowed, tilted her head. "Pressure, not bad, like coming up too fast but slow." She swallowed again. "It just stopped. It's fine now." She looked at the plate in Neff's hands. "That thing tell you what my ears are doing?" Neff looked at the plate. The plate told him what her ears were doing. He did not answer her for a moment because he was reading it a second time to be sure, and then a third, because it was not a thing the reader had a category for, and it had made one. The station Orect ran its habitable ring at a pressure calibrated for Ilithi lungs, which was low, lower than the human's homeworld by a measurable margin, low enough that the intake had flagged her for supplemental partial pressure, and then rescinded the flag when her blood oxygen came back inexplicably fine. Neff had assumed a reading error. It was not a reading error. The human's body had read the station's atmosphere off her own blood, read the thin pressure, read the shifted gas balance, read the small chronic strain of a lowland animal breathing highland air. And it had, without a hand, without a manifest, without a single licensed tissue from the Sable Reserve, begun rebuilding her lungs. Not repairing them. Repairing was done. The wreck damage was closed. This was new construction. The reader showed alveolar surface increasing, capillary density climbing. The whole gas exchange architecture of her chest reorganizing itself toward a body that would find the station's thin air not merely survivable, but easy. And the pressure she had felt in her ears was the middle ear structure retuning itself to match, adjusting to a change the lungs had initiated, the whole organism moving together toward a decision no single part of it had announced. "It's adapting her to the station," Neff said. He heard his own voice from a distance. "Warden." The graft read the ambient pressure and it decided she should be comfortable here. It's rebuilding her lungs to fit Orect. Nobody asked it to. It's not in the manifest. There's no tissue in the Sable Reserve for high-altitude respiration. We don't license lungs. Why would we license lungs? He stopped. It's building her lungs out of clay it took apart. It designed them. It's building to a design, Warden, and the design isn't ours, and the design is right. Veseth was very still. "Ask her," she said, "if she asked for that." Neff asked her. He asked Reese Calloway in the trade tongue whether she had wanted the thing in her chest to make her breathe the station's air more easily, whether she had thought about it, wished for it, decided it in any way she could name. The human thought about it. She always thought about it. "No," she said. "But it makes sense." She shrugged, a small movement of a species that carried a great deal of meaning in the shoulders. "The air here's thin. I noticed when I woke up, figured I'd get used to it." She looked at the plate, then at Neff. "You're telling me I'm getting used to it faster than that? Body's just handling it." Another shrug. "Bodies do that. You go up a mountain, a few weeks later you're fine. This is quick, I'll give you that. But it's the same thing, isn't it? It's just the body handling it." "It is not the same thing," Veseth said, and for the first time Neff heard something move in her voice that was not the warden's flat reading register, something older. Because your body is handling it with our medium, and our medium does not handle anything. It is handled. And you are the first creature in the recorded history of my species to take the clay out of the hand and shape it yourself and get it right. And you are sitting there telling me it is the same as walking up a mountain. The translator carried this to the human. The human received it. It is the same as walking up a mountain, she said. You've just never met anybody who walks. Neff logged that. He did not mean to log it. It was not a reading. But his hands moved on the plate, and he logged the human's words into the observed-only column beneath the 40 unsigned lines, because some part of him understood already that it was the truest thing that had been said in the hall, and that the hall was going to spend days pretending it had not been said. You've just never met anybody who walks. He would take that sentence out and look at it many times in the days that followed, in the quorum and the quarantine and the terrible quiet room at the end. And every time he took it out, it would be more true than the last time. The column flag went up to the overwardens at the 4th hour and 11 minutes. Neff knew it went up because the ledger told him. A small change in the amber of the column. The specific shade the concordance used to mark a case that had been read from above. Somewhere in the ring, an overwarden had opened Reese Calloway's column and seen 40 unsigned lines, and the observed-only tag in Vesuth's refusal to countersign, and had begun to read, and the reading had gone the way Neff had known it would go, because the column did not contain the thing that would have made the reading go otherwise. The column contained 40 lines of unconducted expression. It did not contain the oriented fibrin, the load-tuned muscle, the lungs built right to a design that was not ours. Those things were on the plate in Neff's hands in the hall. They were not in the ledger, because Vesuth had refused to sign them, because to sign them was to claim them, and so the only record that reached the ring was the record of a graft growing without a hand, which had exactly one meaning in 11,000 years of concordance law, and the meaning was the old fear. The reply came at the 4th hour and 40. It came as a name, which was how the wardship announced that a matter had left the hands of the hall. The concordance simply wrote the name into the column, at the top, above every line, and the name meant that the person it belonged to was now the authority over everything the column touched, and the name was Overwarden Aloon. Aloon, Vesuth said, and closed her eyes for a moment. They sent Aloon. You know him, Warden. I trained under the cantor who trained him. She opened her eyes. Aloon has spent 60 years in the ring reading columns for the one thing the ring exists to catch. He is very good at catching it. He has caught it more times than any overwarden alive, and he has never once been wrong, because until today the thing he catches has never once been anything but what he thinks it is. She looked down at the human, who had settled back against the cradle and closed her eyes, breathing the thin air of the station with lungs that 4 hours ago had not existed, easily, the way a person breathes who has walked up a mountain and reached the top and found it comfortable. He is going to read this column, and he is going to see the one thing he has spent 60 years learning to see, and he is going to be right about every fact in the ledger and wrong about the only thing that matters, and I am going to have to stand in front of him and tell him that the fear he has been the ring's best hand at catching is, this one time, the wrong fear, and I am going to have to do it without a single signed line to stand on, because I will not sign a lie even to be believed. Then sign the truth, Neff said. Sign what's on the plate, the oriented fibrin, the lungs. Put it in the column so he reads what we read. I cannot sign what is on the plate, Vesuth said, gently, the way she corrected a novice who had reasoned well toward a wrong answer. Because to sign a line in the ledger is to attest that a cantor conducted it, and no cantor conducted it. And if I write my hand under the human's lungs, then I have told the concordance that I built those lungs, and I did not build those lungs. She built those lungs. And the day a warden signs her hand under a client's own work to win an argument is the day the ledger becomes a thing that records who is willing to lie best, and on that day my species is already dead and only the paperwork survives. She set the plate stylus in its cradle. No, The column stays honest. A loon will read an honest column and reach the wrong conclusion, and I will meet him at the wrong conclusion and we will work backward from it together, because he is not a fool. He is only certain, and certainty is a thing you can move if you are patient, and you have the body itself on the cradle to show him. And if he won't be moved? Vesuth looked at the human for a long moment. Then he will do to her what the ring does to unconducted growth, she said, which is silence it, because that is the only mercy the ring knows for a thing that grows without a hand, and it is a real mercy, Neff, when the thing is what he thinks it is, when it is a body eating itself alive without a plan. It is the kindest thing we do. And he will try to do the kindest thing we do to a body that is not eating itself, that is building itself lungs, that walked up a mountain, and I do not know yet whether her body will let him. She said the last part very quietly, and Neff did not understand it then. Whether her body will let him, he repeated. She corrected my conduction against an anatomy I don't have, Vesuth said. She rebuilt her lungs to fit a station she'd been awake in for 4 hours. Ask yourself what a body like that does, Neff, when someone reaches into it to make it stop. She picked up her reader again and set it against the sleeping human's throat, against the flat, unremarkable throat with no node in it, nothing to halt, nothing to reach. Ask yourself whether it will read the silencing the way it read the pressure, as a mountain, as one more thing to handle. The ledger added a line. Neff did not log it. He stood and looked at the small, sleeping salvage case, breathing the station's thin air like a woman on a summit. And for the first time he understood that the cold he had felt in the 9th minute had not been fear of the human. It had been fear for the room full of people who were about to reach into her. A loon came down from the ring at the 6th hour, and he came the way an overwarden came, without haste, because haste was a thing the ring had trained out of him along with hope and surprise. He was taller than Vesuth and paler, his amber gone nearly to the color of old glass, and his throat node had the low, steady light of an organ that had not been asked to do anything difficult in a very long time, because difficulty had a habit of arriving already solved when a loon was in the room. He came into the hall and he did not look at the human. He looked at the ledger. He read it standing, with his back half turned to the cradle, the whole column unrolled in the air in front of him, and Neff watched him read the way you watch a master do the thing he is a master at, which is to say too fast to follow. 60 years of columns went into the reading. A loon's eyes moved down the unsigned lines, and Neff could see him counting them, weighing them, sorting them against every column he had ever caught, and Neff could see the moment, near the 40th line, where the lung work began, when the reading arrived at the old fear and stopped there and became certain. How long, a loon said, not to Vesuth, to the column. 6 hours since infusion, Vesuth said, just under. 61 uncountersigned entries in 6 hours, accelerating, no conducting hand logged, observed only tag on your authority. He turned then, finally, not to the human but to Vesuth, and his voice was not unkind, which was worse than if it had been. You refused to sign. That was correct. You logged it honest. That was correct. You are the best hand I ever trained under a warden stole, and you have done every correct thing, and you have done them in service of a conclusion you have not yet said out loud because you know how it sounds. Say it out loud, Vesuth. I would rather hear it from you. It is expressing without conduction, Vesuth said, and it is building to plan. There is no such thing as building to plan without conduction, a loon said. There is expression without conduction, which is the thing we catch, and it has exactly one shape, and the shape is not a plan. The shape is the absence of a plan wearing the client's flesh. You have caught it before. You caught the Cyril case. I read your column. It was clean work. You know the shape. He gestured at the ledger. This is the shape. 61 lines, accelerating, no hand. I do not need to read the plate to know what the plate says. The plate says it is orderly, doesn't it? The plate always says it is orderly in the early hours before it isn't. Orderliness is the mask the thing wears. The sterile case was orderly for 9 hours, and then it was the sterile case. "Read the plate," Veseth said. "I do not need to." "Alun." She did not raise her voice. Veseth did not raise her voice. She simply said his name in the register the hall used for true things, and the overwarden, who had not been told to do anything by anyone in 20 years, stopped. "You trained under the cantor who trained me. You have never once been wrong about the shape. I am asking you, on the strength of 40 years standing at cradles you sent me to read the plate before you decide, because I have read it for 6 hours and it is not the sterile case, and I cannot make you believe that with the ledger cannot hold it. The ledger only holds hands, and there is no hand. It is on the plate. Read the plate." Alun read the plate. Neff gave it to him and watched him read it, and watched 60 years of certainty meet the oriented fibrin and the load-tuned muscle and the lungs built right to a design that was not ours, and watched the certainty not break. Alun's certainty did not break. It was too old and too well made to break, but shift, the way a great mass shifts, slowly, with a groan you feel more than hear. He read the lung work 3 times. He read the pressure adaptation and the middle ear retune, and the way the whole organism had moved together toward a decision no part of it had announced. He read the plate the way Veseth had read it, and when he was done, he did not say it was the sterile case, and he did not say it was not. "Wake her," he said. They woke her. Reese Calloway came up out of sleep the way she did everything, without ceremony, and found a third amber shape in the hall, taller and paler than the other 2, looking at her now with the full weight of the ring's best reader, and she looked back at him with her flat, unbothered eyes and waited, because she had learned already that these were people who talked over her and would get to her when they got to her. "Human," Alun said, the translator carried it. "I am going to reach into the medium in your body and I am going to stop it. Do you understand? It will not hurt. When I am done, the medium will be inert. It will stop building. You will keep what it has already made. This is the correct outcome, and it is why we are able to do this work at all. Do you consent?" The human considered it. "Will I still be able to breathe the air here?" she asked. Alun paused. Neff saw him pause. It was not a question the overwarden had expected, because it was not a question that had ever been asked of him, because no client had ever understood the medium well enough to ask what stopping it would cost. "You will keep the lungs," Alun said. "I am stopping new construction. What is built stays." "Then go ahead," said Reese Calloway. "Stop it. I didn't ask it to keep going anyway." Alun said his stylus. He set his throat node bright, brighter than Veseth had, the full authority of an overwarden, and he reached into the graft with the cessation. Not a conducting channel which shapes growth, but the older instrument beneath it, the halt, the signal that in 11,000 years of concordance medicine had never once failed to make Ilithi tissue go still, because Ilithi tissue was built to receive the halt, was built around the node that heard it, could no more ignore the cessation than a stone could ignore the ground. The cessation went into the human's body and found nothing to stop. Neff read it on the plate. He read the halt signal go in, strong, total, the full weight of the ring, and he read it disperse into the human's tissue like a shout into a field, and he read the tissue not hear it, because there was no node to hear it, because the human did not conduct from an organ that could be silenced. She conducted from everywhere, from every cell at once, distributed through the whole of her the way the Ilith had never in 11,000 years needed to distribute anything. Because the Ilith had a node, and the node was the point you pressed to make them stop, and the human had no point. The human was all point, and you cannot halt a thing that is halted from everywhere and nowhere at once. The graft did not stop. Alun sent the cessation again, harder. Neff watched the plate. The graft, which had been building lungs, paused in its building, not because the halt reached it, but because the human's body had noticed the halt the way it had noticed the pressure, as a condition of the environment, a strange chemical shout from outside, and had turned some fraction of its attention to reading what the shout was. And then, having read it, having found it to be a signal that could not reach any structure it possessed, the body did the thing that would become, in the days that followed, the pattern Neff learned to dread and then to revere. It filed the halt signal as information, noted the frequency, noted the intent, and went back to building lungs. It heard the cessation, Neff said. It read it. Warden over warden, it read the halt and understood it, and decided it didn't apply. Alun sent the cessation a third time. His node was fully bright now, the strain of it visible in his throat, an overwarden pouring the whole weight of his authority into a body that received it as weather. Neff watched the plate and understood that Alun could send the halt 100 times and it would change nothing, because the halt was a key and the human had no lock, and every time the key turned in the empty air the human's body learned the shape of the key a little better. "Stop," Vesoth said. Alun did not stop. "Alun, stop. You are teaching it the cessation. Every time you send it, she reads it. She is building a record of the halt frequency. You are not silencing her. You are showing her exactly what a silencing looks like, note by note, and she is filing it. And if the day comes that you need her not to recognize a halt, you have just spent an hour teaching her every halt you own." Alun's node went dark. He stood over the human, who had watched all of this without understanding a word of it, who had felt, she would say later, nothing at all except a faint far-off pressure like a voice heard through a bulkhead, and who was now looking at the tall, pale shape with something that was, for the first time, not merely patience but a kind of mild curiosity, as though she had begun to notice that these people were afraid and had begun, slowly, to wonder of what. "It cannot be halted," Alun said. He said it flatly to the column, to the ring, to 60 years. There is no node, the cessation has no purchase, it is expressing without conduction, it is building to plan, and it cannot be stopped by any instrument the wardship owns, because every instrument the wardship owns is built to press a node, and it has no node. He turned to Vesoth. "You knew this. You said her body would decide whether to let me. It decided." "It decided," Vesoth agreed. "Then this hall is quarantined," Alun said, "as of now under ring authority, because I do not know what it is, and the one thing I know how to do to a thing I do not know is contain it, and I will do the one thing I know how to do while I learn to do a better one." He was already writing it into the concordance, the quarantine order rolling amber up the column above his name. "No tissue leaves this hall. No medium leaves this hall. The human does not leave this hall." Every reader on her continuously logged to the ring, and Vesoth, he stopped writing. "Find me the thing that stops it. There is a thing that stops everything. Find me the human's node, whatever it is, wherever it is, the point I press to make her still. Everything that lives has a point. Find me hers." "She doesn't have one," Vesoth said. "That is what her species is. That is what the plate has been telling us for 6 hours. She is a body with no point to press. There is no node. There is no valve. There is no single place where her life can be reached and turned off, because her life was never built to be turned off by a hand, because on her world nothing was, because her world is—" Vesoth stopped, and Neff saw her reach for a designation and find that the wardship did not have one, that the catalog of worlds the Illith had mapped had a register for every kind of life they had ever met and no register for this, because this had never come up the loom before. "Her world is a null-conductor world," Vesoth said finally, inventing the term in the moment, and it would go into the concordance that way and stay, the first world the Illith ever classed by what it did not need. A world where life directs itself. Register 0. No hand required. We have never met one. We assumed there were none, the way you assume there is no water that runs uphill, and there is one, and she is on your cradle, and you cannot halt her because you cannot halt a river by pressing the place where the pump would be, because there is no pump, because it was never pumped, it simply runs." Alun looked at the small woman on the cradle for a long time. "How thin is she getting?" he said. It was, Neff realized, the first true question the overwarden had asked, and it was the right one, and it meant that somewhere under the 60 years of certainty Alun had begun to read the actual body instead of the shape he expected. Because the human was getting thin. The plate had been telling Neff that too, quietly, under the wonder of the lungs. Building lungs costs something. Building anything costs something. The human's body was drawing the material for its new construction out of the sable clay and out of the human herself, out of her reserves, out of the fat, and then the spare muscle. Out of the margin, a body keeps against famine, and she was spending that margin fast, faster than the medium alone could replace, because she was building more than the medium had been dosed to build. She had come in dying and half decompressed, and the graft had saved her, and now the graft, driven by a hand that would not stop and could not be stopped, was spending her down to build her better. And if it went on long enough with nothing to spend, it would spend her to nothing. And the most human thing about Reese Calloway, the thing Neff would think about for the rest of his life, was that she knew it, and she had not said a word. "She's burning herself for the material," Neff said. "The construction is running ahead of her intake. She needs to be fed heavily, or the graft is going to spend her down to keep building." "Then feed her," Alun said, "whatever she'll take. As much as she'll take." And then more quietly to Vesuth in the Cantory Register, the thing that meant the reading had truly begun to turn. "It is spending her to improve her. It knows the cost, and it is paying the cost. That is not the Cyril case. The Cyril case never counted the cost. The Cyril case spent everything at once and burned out in a day because it had no plan." He looked at the plate one more time. "This one has a plan, and the plan includes not dying. It is managing its own supply." A pause. "The thing I catch never manages anything. I have caught it 100 times, and it never once looked back to see if the client was still there. This one is looking back." "This one is the client," Vesuth said. "That's the difference. There is no thing riding her. She is the thing. It is not growing on her. It is her growing." Alun did not answer that. He turned and looked at Reese Calloway, who had been fed nothing yet and was already hungry, who could feel, she said later, the warmth in her chest and belly working, could feel it drawing on her, could feel herself getting lighter, and knew what it meant the way a deckhand knows what a dropping fuel gauge means, and who looked back at the overwarden of the ring with her flat, calm, hungry eyes, and said, in the trade tongue, the first thing she had volunteered without being asked, "You should feed me. It's using me up." She said it the way you'd report a reading to a bridge. "It's fixing me and building me, and it's running out of stuff to build with, so it's taking mine. It'll take all of mine if you let it. So feed me and it'll take yours instead of mine, and everybody's better off." She settled back. "I'd start soon. It doesn't slow down." Alun stared at her. "She read her own graph's supply chain," Neff said, very quietly. "Faster than we did. She's never seen a plate. She doesn't know what fibrin is, and she read it faster than the ring." "Feed her," Alun said, and for the first time his voice had lost the thing that had been in it since he came down from the ring, the certainty, the 60 years, and what was left underneath it was the thing Neff had felt in the 9th minute, the cold, the animal register reading the truth ahead of the mind. "Feed her and quarantine the hall, and someone bring me a chair, because I am going to sit with this until I understand it, and I do not understand it, and I have not said that sentence in 20 years. The feeding was its own education, and it began with a refusal Neff did not expect. They brought the nutrient medium the hall kept for clients who could not take solid intake, a balanced Alithi feed dosed to a client's mass, and they ran it into her, and the human's body read it and rejected most of it cleanly, without distress, passed it through and took only a fraction, because the medium was built for Alithi chemistry, and the human's gut was not Alithi and would not pretend to be. Neff read the rejection on the plate and reported it to Alun, who had settled into the chair he would not leave for a day and a night, and Alun watched the plate and said nothing, only watched, because Alun had decided to stop predicting what the body would do and start learning it. "She's not absorbing it," Neff said. "The feed's wrong for her. Her gut's reading it as mostly inedible. She's going to keep spending herself if we can't get material into her she can use. Then give her what her wreck carried, Alun said. Her own kind's provision. It will be in the salvage manifest. They found it in the salvage manifest. The hauler's stores, human ration stock, recovered with the wreck and held in the station's hold against a claim no one would pay, and they brought it to her. And Reese Calloway ate it the way a working person eats, fast and without comment, and her body took it, and the spending stopped, and the plate steadied. But that was not the education. The education came an hour later when Neff read the human's gut and found it changed. It had adapted to the Alethi feed. Not rejected it, learned it. Having taken the human ration and steadied itself, having material to spare again, the body had gone back to the Alethi medium it had refused an hour before, the balanced feed built for a chemistry that was not hers, and it had begun, quietly, to build the enzymes to digest it. Neff read the new pathways laying down along her gut, structures to break the alien feed into parts her body could use, drafted and installed in an afternoon, so that the next time the haul ran the Alethi medium into her, she would take it, all of it, because her body had decided that a creature stranded a long way from home should be able to eat what the strangers ate, and had simply built itself the means. She refused our feed, Neff said, and then she learned it. She's building the enzymes to digest Alethi medium. Over Warden, she's making herself able to eat our food. Nobody asked. Her body just decided that a body this far from home shouldn't be picky about fuel. Alun watched the plate for a long time. On her world, he said slowly, a body that could not eat what was in front of it died. A body that could learn to eat a new thing lived. So her kind learned to eat new things, all of them, as a reflex in a lifetime in an afternoon. We licensed that faculty out of existence 11,000 years ago because we did not need it. We conduct our digestion. We build the enzyme when the warden signs the enzyme, and she has it as a birthright, and she is using it on our feed in our hall without a hand. He shifted in the chair. Test it further, not to harm her. I want to know the shape of the faculty. Give her a trace of a pharmacon, the mild one, the settling agent, harmless in a small dose to most chemistries, and read what she does with it. They gave her a trace of the settling agent, the mild pharmacon the hall used to ease a frightened client, dosed low, and told her what it was, because they told her everything now. And Reese Calloway's body read the agent and found it foreign, and did with it what it had done with the feed, took it apart, read its parts, and built, along the way, a small tolerance to it, so that a second dose would do less than the first and a third less than the second, her body learning the pharmacon the way it learned everything, filing it ready. She's building tolerance to it, Neff said. 1 dose and she's already learning it. If we dosed her 100 times, she'd be immune by the 10th. Her body treats every foreign chemistry as a thing to learn. He looked up, and the cold understanding of the 9th minute was in him again, colder now, because he had begun to see the whole shape of it. That's why the quietus is going to fail if it comes to the quietus. She's already learning our chemistry. Every agent we put in her, she reads and files and builds against. We keep handing her the shape of our own instruments, and she keeps keeping them. Yes, Alun said. He said it the way a man says a thing he has decided to stop being afraid of and start respecting. We do. He looked at the human, who had felt the settling agent as a brief mild ease and then nothing, whose body had already made the ease unnecessary. Tell me, Neff, in 6 years at Vesuth's elbow, how many clients have you conducted to tolerate a pharmacon? None. You cannot conduct tolerance. Tolerance is a body teaching itself. We don't teach ourselves, we're taught. None, Alun agreed. And she has done it twice this afternoon, to 2 different agents, without a hand, without a stole, without knowing the word tolerance. Because she is from a world where a body that could not teach itself died, and so every body that lived could teach itself, and she is the ordinary product of a world of such bodies, and she thinks it is Tuesday. He settled deeper into the chair he would not leave. I have spent 60 years learning to catch the one thing a body must never do without a hand. I am going to spend tonight watching a body do 100 things without a hand and get every one of them right. And I am going to have to decide, before Renew decides for me, whether the word for that is the oldest fear we own, or whether we have simply, for 11,000 years, been the only people in the room who could not do it, and mistook our lack for a law. The human ate and slept, and taught herself the stranger's food while she slept, and a loon sat with her through the night with his nose dim and his certainty bending, and Neff read the plate hour after hour and watched a body a long way from home make itself at home, one quiet adaptation at a time, on a station built by people who had never once been able to make themselves anything at all without signing for it first. They fed her, and she stopped getting thin, and then the trouble stopped being medical and started being the other kind. A loon sat with the case for a day and a night, which was a thing overwardens did not do, and the ring noticed. An overwarden was a reader of columns. He read 100 a day from the quiet of the ring and pronounced on them and moved to the next, and the value of an overwarden was precisely that he did not need to sit at a cradle, because sitting at a cradle was a warden's work and there were wardens for it. When a loon stopped reading columns and sat at one, the other seats in the ring read that too, the way a body reads a fever, as a sign that something in the system had gone wrong enough to pull an organ out of its function. And the reading of it up in the ring went the way the first reading had gone, because the ring saw what the ring was built to see: a quarantined hall, an uncountersigned column, an overwarden off his seat, and a growth no cessation could halt. The name that came into the column at the top, above a loon's on the second day, was Overwarden Renew. Neff did not know Renew, but Vesuth did, and the way Vesuth's nose dimmed when she saw the name told Neff most of what he needed. Renew held a seat in the part of the ring that the rest of the wardship spoke of carefully, the sealed cantery, the readers who kept the oldest law and considered the newer wardship soft physicians, Renew's faction said, where the concordants had once been priests. To the sealed cantery, the halt was not a medical instrument but a sacrament, the act by which the illith had lifted themselves out of the long horror of their own biology. An unconducted growth was not a disease to be managed but a heresy to be ended, and the ending of it was not mercy but hygiene, the keeping clean of the whole species against the one thing that could unmake it. Renew had come up through the sealed cantery, and Renew read Reese Calloway's column from the ring, and Renew wrote, beneath the quarantine order, in the old formal concordance tongue that the translator rendered for the human as though it mattered that she understand it, a single word that Neff had heard perhaps twice in his training, and never in a hall. Unhanded. It's the old name, Vesuth said, when the human asked what the word meant, because the human always asked. For a body that grows without a hand, it is the word we used before we had a medicine, when the only thing to do with such a body was, she stopped. Was what? Said Reese Calloway. Was end it, Vesuth said, before it spread, because in every case we ever knew it did spread, and it took the hall and then the ring and then the station, cell by cell, a growth that turned everything it touched into more of itself with no plan and no end. That is what the word means. It means a thing that must be ended because it cannot be conducted, and it will not stop, and it will consume the world it is in. She looked at the human steadily. Renew has written it into your column. It is not an insult. In Renew's frame it is a diagnosis, and the diagnosis has a treatment, and there is only one. And I am telling you this because you have earned the truth every time you have opened your mouth, and because I would rather you heard it from me than found it out when they came. The human took this in. She looked at the word glowing amber above her hip in a script she could not read, the word that a physician 60 light years up the loom had written to mean end her, and she did the thing she always did, which was to consider it, and then she said, but I'm not spreading. It's just me. It's not going into anybody else. No, Vesuth said, you are not spreading. So it's the wrong word. It is the wrong word. But it is the only word we have for a body that grows without a hand, and Renew is reading your column with the only word we have, and the word comes with a treatment, and the treatment does not care whether the word is right. Vesuth crouched by the cradle, which brought her strange amber face level with the humans, and Neff had never once seen the warden do that for a client. Reese Calloway, I am going to try to prove to the ring that the word is wrong before Renew can act on it being right. I do not know if I can. I have never had to argue this, because until you there was never a case where the word was wrong. Do you understand what I am telling you? You're telling me they might kill me for healing wrong, the human said, and you're the one trying to stop it and you might not be able to. She said it flatly, the way she said everything, a reading off a gauge. Okay, she thought for a moment. What do you need me to do? Keep breathing their thin air like it's nothing, Vesuth said. Keep letting me read you, and when they reach into you, do what you have been doing. A pause. Handle it. Renew ordered the extraction on the third day. It was not the silencing. The silencing was a graver thing and required a quorum, and even the sealed cantery did not silence a client without the ring's assent. The extraction was smaller and it was, in Renew's frame, generous. A last attempt to save the human by taking the medium out of her, reclaiming the sable clay, stripping the unhanded growth back to the body it had colonized and letting that body, freed of the medium, return to its own slow, safe healing. It was the treatment for an early case, before the growth had integrated, and it had a good record, and Renew ordered it from the ring with the confidence of a physician who had reclaimed 100 grafts, and did not know that this one was no longer a graft sitting in a body but a body that had eaten the graft and made it bone. Alun ran the extraction himself, because Alun would not send a warden to do a thing he now suspected would not work, and because Neff understood this only later, Alun wanted to feel it fail with his own hand, so that when he reported to the ring he could say, I did it myself, and it did not work, and no one could tell him he had done it poorly. He reached into the graft with the reclamation channel, the instrument that found the medium's licensed tissues and called them home, unmade them, drew the sable clay back out of the body it had built. In an Alethi client, the channel would have found the medium everywhere it had been placed, still recognizably itself, still the reserves clay wearing the shapes a cantor had given it, and it would have called that clay back and the clay would have come, because clay obeyed the hand. The channel went into Reese Calloway and could not find the clay. There was no clay. There was no medium sitting in her, distinguishable, reclaimable. The human's body had not used the sable stock the way a client used it, holding it as licensed tissue in the shapes the cantor made. The human's body had taken the medium apart to the root, down past tissue, past the licensed shapes, down to raw material, and rebuilt it as her own, as lung, as bone, as the dense corrected muscle along her ribs, indistinguishable now from tissue she had been born with, bearing no maker's mark, answering to no reclamation channel, because it was not the reserve's clay any more wearing a shape. It was her. She had digested the most expensive medium in the Wardship's reserve and made it Reese Calloway, and you could no more call it home than you could call home the meal a person ate a week ago. Alun found this out the way you find out a thing is load-bearing, by pulling on it and feeling the wrong thing move. He sent the reclamation channel, and it found no medium, and, finding no medium, it did what the channel did when it could not find the licensed clay. It reached for the nearest tissue that read as recently built and began to call that home instead, which meant it reached for the human's new lungs, her new bone, her corrected muscle, and began to unmake her, not the medium, her, and the plate in Neff's hands lit with the thing he had been dreading since the 9th minute, which was harm, real harm, an overwarden's instrument beginning to take apart a living body that had done nothing but heal. And the human's body walled it off. Neff read it happen. He read the reclamation channel bite into the new tissue, and he read the human's body register the bite the way it had registered the pressure and the halt, as a condition, a hostile chemistry arriving from outside, and he read it respond, fast, faster than the channel could work, throwing up around the reclamation site a dense barrier of the very tissue the channel was trying to unmake, isolating the wound, localizing the damage. Sealing the reaching instrument off from the rest of her the way you seal a breached compartment. And then, this was the part Neff could not stop seeing, beginning, inside the sealed compartment, to take apart the reclamation channel's own chemistry, to read the instrument that was harming her and metabolize it, to turn the overwarden's reaching hand into more raw material for the lungs. Alun pulled the channel out. Neff saw him do it, saw him pull his own instrument back from a body that had begun to eat it, and saw on the overwarden's face the specific horror of a man who has reached into a great many bodies in his life and been, every time, the most dangerous thing in the contact, and has now reached into one and discovered that he is not. It ate the channel, Neff said. His voice did not sound like his own. Overwarden. She walled off the reclamation site, and then she started metabolizing the channel chemistry, the instrument. She read your reclamation and she started turning it into material. He looked up. You reached in to unmake her, and she started to unmake the reaching. I felt it, Alun said. He sat down. He sat down in the chair someone had brought him a day ago, heavily. An old pale man who had spent 60 years as the safest hand in every room he entered, and he looked at his own hands, and then he looked at Reese Calloway, who had felt the extraction as a deep cold pull that had frightened her for the first time. Neff saw that, saw the human afraid for a single instant when the channel bit, and saw the fear pass the moment her body answered it. Because the fear was the fear of a person, and the answer was the certainty of a body, and the body was not afraid. The body had never once been afraid. The body handled it. Did that hurt? Veseth asked her quietly. Cold, the human said, deep, like something reaching in and grabbing. She rubbed her sternum with the flat of her hand. It stopped, though. It stopped grabbing. She looked at Alun's hands, then at his face, and Neff watched her read the horror on him, and the human always arrived at what it meant. That was you, she said. You reached in to pull the stuff back out, and my body wouldn't let go. She was not accusing him. She was reporting. It wouldn't let go because it doesn't have the stuff anymore. It used it. It's all me now. She lay back. You can't take it back. There's nothing to take back. You just be taking me. Yes, Alun said. The translator gave it to her flat and small. I understand that now. I understand that if I reach in again, I will not reclaim a medium. I will disassemble a person, because there is no longer any line between the two, because you have crossed it, because your body crossed it in the first hour while we argued about the ledger. He looked up at Veseth. Renew will order the silencing. The extraction failed, and the report of it will reach the ring within the hour, and Renew will read it as proof. The growth resisted reclamation. The growth ate the instrument. The growth is beyond the early treatment, and there is only one treatment left. He said it without heat. Renew will be right about every fact and wrong about the only thing that matters, exactly as you said, Veseth. And I do not know how to argue it, because everything Renew will say is true. The extraction failed. She resisted. She ate the channel. Those are facts, and they mean, in every case we have ever known, that the thing must be ended before it takes the hall. She isn't taking the hall, Veseth said. I know she isn't. She's taking the air and the cold and the halt and the channel and making herself out of them, and she is doing it to a plan, and the plan is to stay alive and get stronger and never be that fragile again. Veseth stood over the cradle. That is not a heresy, Alun. That is what everything on her world does. We have simply never met a world where everything does it, and so we have one word for it, and the word is a death sentence, and I am asking you to help me find the ring a second word before Renew ends her with the first. Alun looked at the human for a long time. There is a way to make the ring find a second word, he said slowly. There is one way, and it is the oldest law in the concordance, older than the halt, older than the sealed cantery, and Renew cannot overrule it because the sealed cantery's whole authority rests on it. But it will not save her by mercy, Veseth. It will only save her if she is exactly what you say she is, and if she is not, it will kill her faster than the silencing, and I will have handed her the instrument of her own ending." He stood, the decision made, the 60 years bending fully now toward the new reading. "I need to know what she is before I offer it, and there is only one way left to know." "What is it?" Vesoth said. "We stop feeding her," Alun said, "and we stop reading her, and we take every instrument off her, and we leave her alone in a sealed hall with nothing. No medium, no hand, no help. And we watch what a body that grows without a hand does when it is given nothing and no one. If it is the unhanded thing," Renew says, "it will consume itself, because that is what the unhanded thing does when it runs out of world. And if it is what you say," he looked at Reese Calloway, "if it is what you say, it will do the one thing the unhanded thing has never once done in 11,000 years. It will stop. It will look at what it has, and it will decide it has enough, and it will stop. And a thing that can stop itself is not unhanded, Vesoth. A thing that can stop itself has a hand. It is only that the hand is on the inside." The human had been listening to the translator give her all of this, the extraction and the failure and the word and the death sentence and the test, and she waited until Alun was done. And then she said the thing that Neff logged into the observed-only column beneath everything else, the thing he took out and looked at more than any other in the days that followed. "You want to see if I know when I'm done." She said it like it was simple because to her it was simple. "You've got a whole everything, a whole religion, sounds like, built on the idea that a body doesn't know when it's done, that it just keeps going until somebody stops it. And you've never met a body that knows when it's done." She almost smiled and did not, because Reese Calloway did not smile at frightened people. It was not in her. "Mine knows when it's done. Bodies do where I'm from. You get better and then you're better and then you stop. That's the whole thing. That's not a miracle. That's just Tuesday." She settled back against the cradle and breathed the station's thin air like a woman on a summit. "Take your machines off. I'll show you. It'll stop when it's done. It always stops when it's done." Alun took the machines off. And the sealed cantery, up in the ring, read the report of the failed extraction, and beneath the word "unhanded," Overwarden Renew began to write the summons for a quorum, because the growth had resisted reclamation and eaten the instrument. And there was, in 11,000 years of law, only one treatment left for a thing like that, and Renew intended to bring the whole ring down on the hall to administer it before Vesoth's second word could be found. They sealed the hall and left her in it with nothing, and Neff watched her through the passive field from the observation gallery, because Alun would not let anyone into the hall with her while the test ran. Not for her safety, he said, but for the ring's, so that no cantor's hand could be blamed for anything the body did or failed to do while it was proving what it was. Nothing meant nothing. They took off the readers and the yoke and the cradle's own conduction coupling, and they stopped the feeding lines, and they left Reese Calloway sitting in a bare sealed hall with a body that was still, when they closed the door, drawing on her reserves to build, still spending the good clay and the woman it had made of the good clay, still running the plan. The theory Alun was testing was the oldest theory the Illith owned, that a body without a hand does not stop, that given nothing it will consume itself, that the unhanded thing runs until there is nothing left to run on, and then it dies of its own growth. If Renew was right, they would watch her burn through her reserves and start on the meat of herself and die, and it would be a mercy that they had not fed her into a longer dying. If Vesoth was right, they would watch something no Illith had ever watched. Neff did not leave the gallery for 2 days. The first hours were the hardest to read, because for the first hours nothing changed, and the not changing could have meant either thing. The graft went on. The passive field, cruder than a reader plate but honest, showed the construction continuing. She was, when they sealed her in, partway through a reorganization of her cold response that Neff had flagged that morning, the station's habitable ring running a few degrees below the human's comfort and her body, having handled the pressure, having handled the extraction, turning some fraction of its attention to the cold. It was building her a better answer to the cold, more brown tissue along the spine and shoulders, a retuned circulation that would keep her hands and feet warm without spending her core. The kind of adaptation an Illith would have needed a warden and a week, an assigned column to install, and that her body was drafting in an afternoon out of the material it had on hand. And the material it had on hand was running out. "It's still building," Veseth said beside him at the gallery rail. She had not left either. The cold response. "It's still laying it down, and there's nothing coming in." She did not say what they were both watching for, which was the moment the construction turned from the reserves to the woman, the moment the plan ran out of clay and reached for the meat, the moment that would prove Renew right. It did not come. Neff watched the passive field and watched the cold response near completion, and watched the reserves fall, and he watched the graft do the thing that he would spend the rest of his career failing to explain to Illith who had not seen it. As the material ran low, the construction did not speed up in a panic, and it did not reach for the meat. It slowed. It read the falling supply the way it had read the pressure and the halt, as a condition, and it answered the condition the way a good engineer answers a fuel warning, not by burning faster, but by finishing what mattered and shelving what didn't. The cold response, half-built, did not stop dead. The body finished the parts that would keep her alive in the ring's chill, and left the parts that were only comfort as an unfinished frame. Marked. Neff would swear marked, as though the body had made a note to itself to come back to this when there was clay to spare. And then, with the essential adaptations done and the reserves low and no hand anywhere in the sealed hall directing anything, the construction wound down and slowed, and reached a kind of idle. Stopped. Neff read it stop. He read the whole vast unhanded engine of her, the thing that had digested the Sable Reserve and eaten an Overwarden's channel and shrugged off the ring's oldest instrument. Look at what it had built and what it had left to build with and decide, with no organ of decision anywhere in her, from everywhere in her at once, that it had enough. That she was, for now, done. That the woman on the bare cradle in the sealed hall was, given the material available, as good as she needed to be, and that the correct thing to do with a low supply and a completed essential list was to hold and wait and spend nothing and rest. The graft went quiet. Not inert. Neff made himself certain of that because it mattered, because inert was what the cessation had tried and failed to make it, and this was not that. The cessation halted. This had not been halted. This had stopped itself, which was a different thing entirely, the difference between a machine switched off and a runner who has reached the top of the climb and stands there breathing. The engine idled. It held its readiness. If the cold had deepened, it would have answered. If food had come, it would have taken it and finished the shelved comfort work. If a wound had opened, it would have closed it. It had not switched off. It had decided it was done and stood there breathing and waited for a reason to move again. Beside him, Veseth made a sound he had never heard a warden make. "It stopped," she said. "A loon, it stopped. It ran out of easy clay and it did not touch her, it did not touch the meat, it finished what she needed and it stopped, and it is holding. It is holding a loon. It knew when it was done." A loon came to the rail and read the passive field for a long time in silence. "A thing that can stop itself," he said finally, "has a hand." He said it the way a man says the words of a right he had thought he understood his whole life and was only now at the end of it hearing. It has a hand. The hand is on the inside. She conducts herself. She is not unhanded, she is. He reached for it, and the concordance did not have the word, and he made one, the way Veseth had made null conductor, the way this whole case had been forcing the Illith to make words for things they had sworn could not exist. She is self-handed. She is her own cantor. Every cell she owns is a hand, and they are all one hand, and the hand knew when the work was done, and it set the tools down. He turned from the rail. Renew is wrong, not about the facts. Renew is wrong about the thing beneath the facts, which is that a body without an organ of direction has no direction, and it has direction. It is direction. It is all direction, and the oldest law protects it, and Renew cannot silence her because... The concordance chimed. It was the chime Neff had heard twice in his life, The one that meant a quorum of the ring had been summoned to a full sitting, every overwarden, every seat, the whole authority of the wardship convened at once. The name at the head of the summons was Renew. The matter was Reese Calloway, and the treatment named in the summons, the thing the quorum was convened to authorize, was the silencing. "She's moving before the report," Vesoth said. "She's convening the quorum on the extraction failure alone. She hasn't read the isolation test. She doesn't know it stopped." "She doesn't want to know it stopped," Alun said. "Renew has read this column with the old word since the 4th hour, and Renew has been right about the old word for 60 years. And Renew is not going to sit in a gallery for 2 days watching a body decide it is done. Renew read the extraction failure, the growth-resisted reclamation, ate the instrument, and Renew wrote the summons, because in Renew's frame the isolation test is not a test, it is a delay, and every hour we delay is an hour the unhanded thing has to spread." He was already moving, an old overwarden moving faster than Neff had seen him move, toward the lift that would take him up to the ring and the quorum. "I have to reach the sitting before the vote. The oldest law is the only thing that stops a silencing, and it only applies if she has a hand, and she has a hand. We watched her hand set the tools down, but the ring did not watch it. The ring only has Renew's column and the old word, and if I cannot make them read the isolation test before they vote, they'll silence a woman for knowing when she's done," Vesoth said. "They'll silence her for the thing that makes her safe," Alun said. "That is the shape of it. The very thing that proves she is not the horror that she stopped, that she has a hand, that she is a conductor, is invisible to them, because a conductor is one of us. A conductor has a node and a stole and a seat, and they will not look at a small dying salvage case with no node and see a conductor. They will see the unhanded thing wearing the mask of order, because that is what they have always seen, and they have always been right." He stepped into the lift. "Keep the readers off her. Whatever happens in the sitting, whatever order comes down, do not let anyone reach into her until I send word. If they reach into her now in front of the ring and her body does what it did to my channel, if it walls off a silencing and eats it in front of the whole quorum, then Renew will have her proof, the proof that it resists every treatment, and no law I cite will save her. She has to stay still. She has to stay the small quiet thing that stopped when it was done. Do you understand? Her safety is in her stillness now. Keep her still." The lift took him up. Vesoth stood at the gallery rail and looked down through the passive field at the human, who had felt none of this, who had felt only the warmth in her chest wind down to an idol, and had understood in her flat, unbothered way exactly what it meant. Reese Calloway sat on the bare cradle in the sealed hall with a body that had decided it was done, and she rubbed her warm hands together in the ring's chill, and she looked up at the gallery where the 2 amber shapes stood watching her, and she did a thing Neff had not seen her do. She raised one hand to them, not a wave, not a plea, just a flat small acknowledgement, "I see you up there," and she settled back to wait, because she had told them it would stop when it was done, and it had stopped when it was done, and now she was waiting for them to catch up to a thing she had known on the first day, which was that her body was not a horror and not a miracle, that it was just a body from a world where bodies handled things, and that the only unusual fact in the entire hall was that she had walked into a civilization that had never once, in 11,000 years, met anybody who could walk. "She stopped when she was done," Vesoth said again, to no one, to the rail, to the ring above them where the quorum was gathering to end her for it. "And they are going to sit in a circle and vote on whether a thing that knows when it is done is allowed to exist, and the terrible part, Neff, the part I will carry, is that half of them will vote to end her not out of cruelty but out of care, because they have spent their whole lives believing that a body cannot be trusted, that a body left to itself is death, and they are not wrong about our bodies. Our bodies cannot be trusted. Our bodies are why we built all of this. And they cannot tell the difference between a body that must be conducted and a body that conducts itself, because they have never needed to, because there was only ever one kind of body in the universe, until her. Below them in the sealed hall, The human waited. Above them in the ring, the quorum sat. And Neff stood between the two, at the rail, with the observed-only column glowing on his plate, 61 lines and then 100, and then the long, quiet flat line of a graph that had stopped itself. Unsigned, unclaimed, honest, and understood that everything now turned on whether an old overwarden could make a room full of physicians read a flat line as the safest thing they had ever seen instead of the most dangerous, before another old overwarden convinced them to press a node that wasn't there. The vote went to Renew, and Alun lost it by 2 seats, and the reason he lost it was the reason he had feared. He came to the sitting with a flatline and a story, and Renew came with a failed extraction and a word 11,000 years old, and a room full of physicians who had spent their lives keeping the species clean of the unhanded thing, found the word easier to trust than the story, because the word had never once been wrong, and the story had never once been told. Neff heard it from Vesuth, who heard it from Alun through the concordance. In the flat formal language the ring used to record its own decisions. The quorum authorized the silencing. It named Renew to administer it as the senior seat of the sealed cantory, and it granted Renew the hall. Alun's citation of the oldest law, the law of the conducting hand, that no one may act upon a graft except through its conductor or with the conductor's consent, had been heard and set aside, because the oldest law protected a conductor, and the ring did not accept that the human was a conductor, because a conductor had a node and a stole, and the human had neither. And to the ring, a body with no node was by definition unhanded, and the oldest law simply did not apply to a body that had no hand. Alun had argued that the isolation test proved a hand. The ring had answered that a growth going quiet proved nothing, but that it was resting between consumptions, as the Serral case had rested, as the unhanded thing always rested before it took the hall. And the vote had gone to Renew by 2 seats, and Renew was already in the lift. "She's coming down to do it herself," Vesuth said. Her node had gone to almost nothing. Renew will administer the quietus with her own hand in the hall because the sealed cantory does not delegate a silencing. They consider it a sacrament, the highest one they keep. She was moving as she spoke, toward the hall's sealed door, and Neff moved with her. Alun is coming down behind her, but he cannot stop her. The quorum gave her the hall, and if he lays a hand on her, he has broken the ring and lost the only authority he has left to protect the human after. He can only watch. We can only watch. She stopped at the door. "Neff, listen to me. When Renew administers the quietus, the human's body is going to do what it has done to everything. It is going to read the agent and answer it. And I need you to read what it does, faster than Renew, and I need you to be ready to say it out loud, because there is a version of the next hour in which the human survives and the ring learns nothing. And there is a version in which the human survives and the ring finally sees. And the difference between the two is whether anyone is reading the plate when it happens, and whether they have the nerve to say what it says while Renew is standing over the body. Can you do that?" "I can do that," Neff said. The quietus was the gravest instrument the wardship owned, and Neff had never seen it, only read of it because it was not medicine. It was the thing at the bottom of medicine, the last answer to the unhanded thing. It was not a signal like the halt. The halt pressed the node and the human had no node, and Renew knew the halt would fail. The quietus was chemical. It was a designed severing agent, a molecule built over 11,000 years to do one thing perfectly, which was to cut the conduction that held elithy tissue together, to unmake the connection between cell and cell, to let a body that could not be halted fall quietly and completely apart at the joints of its own direction. It was lethal to any illith in a dose smaller than a tear. It severed conduction, and everything the illith were was conducted, and so the quietus was the one door in the wardship that was always locked, and Renew was bringing it down to the hall to open it over a small salvage case who had told them, on the first day, that her body knew when it was done. Renew came into the gallery side of the hall with 2 cantors of the sealed cantory, and the quietus in a sealed carrier, that even the carrier's makers had built to be afraid of. Renew was smaller than a loon and darker amber, and old in the specific way of someone who had made peace long ago with being the hand that did the thing no one else would do. There was no cruelty in the face. Neff made himself see that. There was only the terrible calm of a physician who believed absolutely that the kindest act available was the one everyone else was too soft to perform. Renew looked through the passive field at the human sitting on the bare cradle in the sealed hall, the small quiet thing that had gone still, and Renew read the stillness as the rest between consumptions, and Renew was not moved, because Renew had been reading that stillness for 60 years and had buried every hall that trusted it. They opened the hall. Renew went in alone with the carrier, which was the sacrament's form, the silencer and the silenced, and no one between them, and the two sealed cantors sealed the door behind and took their place at the field, and a loon arrived at the gallery too late to be anything but a witness, and Vesuth and Neff stood at the rail with the plate live in Neff's hands, reading the human through the hall's own passive field, because Renew had forbidden a reader in the room. Reese Calloway watched Renew cross the hall to her. She did not know the face and she did not know the carrier, but she knew, the way she knew everything, what it meant, because she had been told on the first day that they might end her for healing wrong, and here was an old careful shape crossing a sealed room toward her with a thing built to be afraid of. And the human read all of that and did the thing she always did, which was to consider it, and then to be practical. "You're the one who's going to do it," she said. The translator carried it to Renew flat and small. "The killing, that's you." "Yes," Renew said. The sealed cantory did not lie to the silenced. It was the one courtesy the sacrament kept. "I am going to place an agent in you that will let your body come apart. It will not hurt. You have grown without a hand, and a thing that grows without a hand cannot be permitted because it does not stop and it takes everything around it, and I have seen what it takes, more times than anyone alive. I am sorry that you are the shape it wears this time. You seem to be a person. That is the cruelest form it has ever taken." Renew opened the carrier. "I am going to do this now." "It stopped, though," the human said, not pleading, reporting. "You know that, right? Whatever they told you up there, it already stopped. It ran out of stuff to build with and it finished what mattered and it quit. I felt it quit. That's why I'm just sitting here. It's done." She looked at the carrier, then at Renew's face. "You're about to kill me for a thing that already stopped on its own. And I can't prove it to you because the proof is that I'm sitting still, and sitting still is also what you think I do right before I eat the room, so there's nothing I can say." She settled her warm hands in her lap. "But you should stand back after you put it in me." Renew paused. "Why?" "Because it's going to come back out," said Reese Calloway. "Everything you've put in me so far, my body read it and figured out what it was and either used it or got rid of it. The cold thing you reached in with, it walled that off and started eating it. Whatever's in that box, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to read it and answer it, and if it can't use it, it's going to push it back out. And you're standing right here. So when it comes back out, it's going to come out at you." She looked up at the old physician with her flat, unbothered eyes. "I'm not threatening you. I don't even know what's in the box. I'm telling you how my body works because you're about to be closer to it than anybody, and I'd stand back." Renew administered the quietus. Neff read it go in. He read the severing agent enter the human's blood, the molecule 11,000 years perfect, the last answer, and he read it spread through her the way it was built to spread, reaching for the conduction that held her together, reaching for the joints of her direction to cut them, and finding, as the cessation had found, and the reclamation channel had found, nothing built the way it expected. The quietus was designed to sever conduction that ran through a node, conduction that flowed from a center to the tissue, and it cut that conduction wherever it found it. The human's conduction did not flow from a center. It ran everywhere, cell to cell, a web with no throat, and the quietus cut a strand of it and found 10,000 strands beside it uncut, cut those and found 10,000 more, An agent built to sever a single great cable working uselessly at the edge of a net that had no cable in it anywhere. And the human's body read the agent. Neff read the agent. He read the whole self-handed engine of her. Quiet, resting, done, come awake the instant the quietest touched a strand of her. The way it had come awake for the pressure and the halt and the channel, and turn its vast distributed attention to this new hostile chemistry, and read the severing agent down to its shape, the shape 11,000 years perfect, and recognize it, because she had met its family before. The reclamation channel that a loon had reached in with days ago, the instrument her body had walled off and begun to metabolize. That had been a severing chemistry too, a lesser cousin of the quietus, from the same old concordance lineage of agents built to cut conduction, and her body had taken it apart and learned it, and in the quiet resting days since, had kept the lesson, had built and shelved a pathway for exactly this shape of molecule the way it had shelved the unfinished cold response. Marked. Ready, a hand's note to itself. If this comes again, here is what it is, here is how you take it apart. The quietus came again, and her body knew what it was and took it apart. She's metabolizing it, Neff said, out loud at the rail, loud enough for the field to carry to the cantors and up to the ring where the quorum was still sitting, watching its sacrament through the hall's own eyes. The quietus. She's not dying of it, she read it, she recognized it. It's the same family as the reclamation channel, and she kept the pathway. She's taking the severing agent apart. She's turning the quietus into material. He read the plate, his voice steady because Vesuth had told him to have the nerve to say it, and he had found the nerve somewhere he did not know he kept it. The most lethal instrument the wardship owns just went into a body that already knew how to eat it, because we taught her the family ourselves, days ago, with the extraction, and she remembered. And then her body did the thing she had told Renew it would do. Having read the quietus and taken it apart, having pulled the perfect severing molecule down into its parts, her body found among those parts a thing it could not use, a reactive fragment left over from the cutting, and it did with that fragment what her body did with everything it could not use. It pushed it back out. It vented it. It expelled the spent, half-severed remnant of the quietus out through the fastest channel it had, out of her blood and her breath and the surface of her, back into the hall, a small cloud of a severing agent, broken but not harmless, its cutting edge dulled but not gone, pushed out of a body that had no use for it into the space directly in front of the human, where Renew of the sealed cantery stood over the cradle with her node bright, closer to the human's body than anyone had ever stood. Exactly as the human had said, exactly where the human had told her not to be. The remnant reached Renew's node. It was a fraction of a dose, dulled, spent, a thing that would have done nothing at all to the human even undiminished. But Renew was Illith, and Renew had a node, and Renew's conduction ran from that node through all of her the way the quietus was built to cut, and the remnant did not need to be a full dose to find the one great cable it was made for and sever a strand of it. Neff read it on the plate, the sudden wrongness in the old physician's conduction, the throat node's bright authority stuttering, a strand of the thing that held Renew together coming quietly apart. Renew made a sound. Renew's node went dark, and then flickered, and then went to the low, uneven light of an organ that had lost a strand of itself, and Renew stepped back from the cradle at last, too late, one hand at her own throat, and the two sealed cantors were already moving to her, already sealing the hall the other way now, already calling for the carrier and the counteragent that the sealed cantery kept for exactly the accident that had just happened. Because the quietus was lethal to Illith, and every Illith who carried it knew the first rule of it, which was never be downstream of it, and Renew had stood downstream of it over the body of a woman who had told her, flatly, in plain trade speech, to stand back. The human watched them pull Renew away from the cradle. She had felt the quietus go in as a warmth and a strangeness, and she had felt her body wake and read it and answer it, and she had felt herself push the spent remnant out the way you spit out something gone bad, and she had watched it reach the old physician who had crossed the room to kill her, and she did not smile, because Reese Calloway did not smile at frightened people, and there was no one in the room now who was not frightened. She watched the sealed cantors work over Renew with the counteragent, watched the old careful shape that had meant to silence her fight now for its own conduction on the floor of the sealed hall, and she said, quietly, to no one, in the flat voice she used for readings, the only thing she said through the whole of it. I told her to stand back. Renew did not die. The sealed cantory kept a counteragent for exactly the accident that had happened, and they reached the old physician with it in time, and Renew's conduction was rebuilt over the following days by 3 wardens working in shifts, a strand at a time, the slow, careful reconstruction of a body that had come apart at one joint of its direction. But a strand once severed did not come back the same, and Renew came out of the reconstruction diminished, the node's authority never again quite what it had been, an over-warden of the sealed cantory who would spend the rest of a long life knowing that the last answer, the perfect answer, the answer that had never once failed in 11,000 years, had been handed back to her out of the body of a small salvage case who had told her, in plain words, to stand back. The ring did not silence Reese Calloway again. It was not mercy that stopped them, and it was not shame, though there was shame in the ring and it was real. It was the plate. Because Neff had read the quietus being metabolized out loud, at the rail into the field, while the whole quorum watched through the hall's own eyes, and the ring could not unread it. The most lethal instrument the wardship owned had gone into the human, and the human had eaten it, and the ring had seen it happen, and now the ring was split, not 2 seats this time but down the middle, because half of them read what they had seen as Renew had always read it, as final proof that the unhanded thing resisted every treatment and therefore must be ended by any means left. And half of them had watched a body take apart the quietus with a pathway it had built days earlier off a lesser cousin of the same agent, had watched a body remember, and could not any longer make the word unhanded fit, a thing that remembered. A thing that remembers has a hand, Alun said to the ring, and this time they did not set it aside, because this time they had watched it remember. He set it into the full sitting, with the hall's record of the silencing unrolled above the quorum. The plate-reading Neff had spoken while it happened logged now into the concordance under Neff's own name, the first thing in the whole case that anyone had been willing to sign, because it was not a claim of conduction, it was only a witness of a fact. You have all seen it now. Not a flatline you could call a rest, not a story I told you. You watched her body meet the quietus and recognize it and take it apart with a pathway she built off the reclamation channel days ago and kept. She kept it. She built a defense against a class of agent, filed it, and held it ready against the day it came again, and it came again as the gravest instrument we own, and she was ready. That is memory. That is anticipation. That is a body reading a threat, drafting an answer, shelving the answer, and deploying it on recognition. There is a word in the concordance for a faculty that reads, drafts, shelves, and deploys tissue-level change to intent. He let the sitting sit with it. The word is conduction. We have simply never seen it run without a node because it never has until her. She is not unhanded. She is the most thoroughly handed body any of us has ever read. The hand is only that we cannot see it because it is not in her throat. It is in all of her at once. Renew answered from the reconstruction, by voice, because Renew could not yet make the node carry the formal tongue. Neff would remember that too, that the old physician insisted on answering, would not let the diminishment be a reason to stay silent, and that what Renew said was not a retraction. If she conducts, Renew said slowly, each word a strand held together by will, then by the oldest law I have committed the gravest act the wardship knows. I administered a silencing to a conductor. I acted upon a graft against its conducting hand. That is the one crime older than the halt. So you will forgive me, Alun, if I am slow to name her a conductor, because the moment I do, I am not a physician who made an honest error against an unhanded thing. I am a warden who tried to silence a colleague. A long pause, the node flickering with the cost of it, but I watched her eat the quietus. And I have buried more halls to the unhanded thing than anyone in this ring, and I know its shape. I know it better than any of you, and I will tell you the thing none of you want to hear from me because I am the last one who should say it and therefore the only one you will believe." The old voice steadied. "It was never this. Not once. In every hall I buried, the thing took the room because it did not know when to stop, and it did not know what it was, and it did not know that I was standing over it. This one knew all three. This one told me to stand back. The unhanded thing never once told me to stand back. A silence in the ring. I do not want her to be a conductor. It costs me everything to say she is. She is." The ring was quiet for a long time after that. They tested her in the end, because the ring was a body of physicians and physicians did not act on a moving speech. They acted on a demonstrated fact. And the oldest law required not a witness's word that she was a conductor but a demonstration that met the concordance's own definition. The same definition a novice cantor met to earn the stole. That a conductor could direct a graph to a stated intent, and then on intent, stop. Any body could be made to grow. The unhanded thing grew. The stole was earned by stopping, by holding an intent in the mind and making the tissue obey it, and then making the tissue cease, on nothing but the will to cease, because the will to cease was the whole of what separated a conductor from a growth. Neff had earned his own stole that way 6 years ago, directing a patch of licensed tissue to thicken and then, on the examiner's word, to stop. And the stopping had been the test, always the stopping. They fed her, and they gave her the intent through the translator. And Neff stood at the cradle with the plate to read whether a body with no node could pass the test that made a cantor. "They want you to do a thing on purpose," Neff told her, and he was the one who told her because Vesuth had asked that it be him, the junior, the one who had read her from the 9th minute. "There is unfinished work in you. The cold response you started before they sealed the hall, your body finished the parts that keep you alive and shelved the parts that are only comfort, the warmth in your hands and feet. It marked them to come back to. The ring wants you to bring them back, on purpose, to decide now with your mind to finish the shelved work and then when it is going to stop it, on purpose, both, the deciding and the stopping." He looked at her. "I don't know if you can do it on purpose. Your body has been doing all of this without you asking. This is asking you to ask." Reese Calloway considered it. "You want me to tell my own body to do something," she said, "and it listens, and then tell it to quit and it listens." She almost laughed and did not. "That's the test. That's what makes one of you a whatever the word is, a conductor." She shook her head slowly. "Where I'm from, that's not a test anybody would set. That's just clenching your fist. You want to make a fist, you make a fist. You want to stop, you stop. Everybody can do that." She looked at Neff and something moved behind the flat eyes the first time he had seen her understand the full size of the gap between her world and his. "You can't, can you? None of you. You can't just tell your own body a thing and have it listen. You have to reach in with a machine and a license and write it in a book. Your own body won't listen to you without the machine." She sat with that. "That's the loneliest thing I ever heard." "Show them," Neff said quietly, "please. Make the fist." She made the fist. Neff read it on the plate, and it was the cleanest reading of the whole case, cleaner than the lungs, cleaner than the quietus. She closed her eyes and she found the shelved work the way a person finds a held breath, and she decided. Neff watched her decide. Watched the intent form and the distributed hand of her whole body take up the intent at once. And the shelved cold response resumed. The comfort warmth her body had left as an unfinished frame days ago. The circulation to the hands and feet, laying itself down now not on the body's own schedule but on hers, on the woman's stated will. Faster where she pushed and slower where she eased. A body doing a thing because the person who was that body had decided the thing should be done. And Neff read the ring reading it too, through the field. The whole quorum watching a small salvage case with no node direct a tissue-level change to a stated intent, doing in plain sight the first half of the test that earned the stole. "Now stop," Neff said. She stopped. Neff read the stop, and it was the stop that mattered, The stop the whole of the concordance was built to prize, the will to cease. She did not let the work run out on its own. She reached into it with nothing but her mind, and she set it down, mid-course, the warmth in her hands half restored and holding there, exactly as far as she had taken it and no farther, stopped on intent, held on intent, a body ceasing because the person who was that body had decided it should cease. The plate flatlined the construction, clean, chosen, and Neff looked up at the field and said, "Into the record," in a voice that did not shake. She directed a graph to a stated intent and stopped it on intent. That is the test, that is the stole. He set the plate down. By the concordance's own definition, witnessed by this ring, Reese Calloway conducts. She is a conductor of her own graft. The oldest law applies to her in full. No hand may act upon her graft except through her or with her consent. He looked at the small woman on the cradle, who had just made a fist and been told it made her, by the law of a civilization 60 light years long, a warden. There is only one hand that may sign her column. It is hers. The ring did not vote on it. There was nothing to vote on. The oldest law was not a thing the quorum granted. It was the ground the quorum stood on. The law that made the sealed cantoree's own authority mean anything, and a conductor's authority over her own graft was the first stone of it, older than the halt, older than the ring, the law that said the hand that made a body owns the record of what it made. They had spent 11,000 years certain that no body could be its own hand, and so certain that the law protecting the hand could never protect the body itself. And now, a small salvage case had made a fist in front of the whole ring and collapsed the distinction, and the law that they had built to keep bodies safe from themselves turned, in a single afternoon, into a law that kept a body safe from them. "Bring her the stylus," a loon said. It was not an order the ring could refuse, and it was not one it wanted to in the end, because the ring was a body of physicians, and a physician, when the fact finally arrives, follows the fact. Neff brought her the stylus, the ledger stylus, the instrument that only a conductor's hand could hold to sign a graft into the concordance, the tool he had earned 6 years ago, and that Reese Calloway had earned that afternoon by clenching her fist. He brought it to the cradle, and he put it in the human's hand, the small scarred hand that 4 days ago had been crushed in a HFY, and now held the oldest instrument of a civilization that had tried 3 times to stop it and failed. And he showed her the column, her own column, the 100 and more unsigned lines glowing amber at her hip, the whole honest record of everything her body had chosen and built and stopped, waiting, as it had waited from the 9th minute, for a hand. "That's the book," she said, "the one that says who made me what I am." She looked at the long column of lines she could not read, the lungs and the bone and the cold response and the quietus, every choice her body had made written out in a script she had encountered 5 days ago. "And it's been empty this whole time. Nobody would sign it, because signing it means saying you did it and none of you did it." She looked at Neff. "And now you're telling me I can sign it because I did do it." "You did do it," Neff said. Reese Calloway looked at the stylus in her hand for a while. Then she looked at the human column glowing at her hip, and Neff watched her understand the whole size of it at last, not the medical size, which she had understood on the first day, but the other size, the size that had brought an overwarden off his seat and split the ring and diminished the sealed cantoree's oldest hand, the size of a civilization that had built its entire self around the certainty that a body could not be trusted to itself, meeting the first body in 11,000 years that could, and having no choice, by its own oldest law, but to hand her the pen. She signed the first line herself, and the ledger accepted it, and that was the moment the ring changed. Neff had shown her how to hold the stylus, and she had held it the way she held everything, without ceremony, and she had reached the tip to the first amber line, the oriented fibrin, the tear that had knitted in the 9th minute while Vesuth said it was settling, and she had made the mark the concordance took for a signature, a single deliberate stroke, and the line had gone from the amber of the unsigned to the steady white of the countersigned, claimed at last, 5 days late, by the only hand that could honestly claim it. Neff watched it turn white and felt something turn over in his chest that he did not have a word for and would not find one for years. 100 and more lines waited beneath it. She signed them one at a time, slowly, because she could not read them, and Neff read each one to her before she signed, told her what her body had done and when. The lungs and the pressure and the middle ear and the walled-off channel and the shelved cold response and the quietus taken apart. The whole record of a body conducting itself through 5 days of a civilization trying to stop it. And she listened to each one, and then she signed it, claiming it. And the column turned white line by line under her small scarred hand, while the ring watched through the field and said nothing at all. When it was done, the column was white from top to bottom, the first fully self-signed graft in the recorded history of the concordance, a body that had made itself, and then, by the oldest law, put its own name to the making. "It's a strange thing to sign," she said, when the last line went white. "A list of everything you did without deciding to." She set the stylus down on the cradle rail. "Feels like signing your own breathing." "To us," Neff said, "it is the most decided thing there is. Every line in every column we own, someone chose with a hand on purpose and signed. We have never had a line that happened without choosing. You have 111 of them, and you signed them all, and that is the strangest column in 11,000 years, and it is also the most honest, because you are the only conductor who ever signed a column and meant truly, I am the one who did this, with nothing left out and no one else's hand in it." He looked at the white column. "We spend our whole lives building each other, one signature at a time. You built yourself while we argued about whether you were allowed to, and then you signed it." Reese Calloway looked at him for a moment with the flat eyes that were, he had come to understand, not flat at all, only quiet, only a person from a world of quiet competence looking at a world that had never learned how to be quiet because it had never once been allowed to trust itself. "Ask me the thing you've been not asking me," she said. "You've all been very careful about it. The intake, the old pale one, that Vesuth. Nobody's asked me the thing." She held his eyes. "My crew. You pulled me out of the hauler 11 hours after the hull went. Nobody gets pulled out 11 hours after the hull goes. So either I'm the only one you found or I'm the only one you looked for. Which is it?" Neff had known this would come, and had hoped, in the coward's part of him, that it would come to Vesuth and not to him. It came to him. He told her the truth, because everyone in the hall had learned by now that she had earned the truth every time she opened her mouth, and because a person who had just signed her own breathing into a book was owed the one line that was not in it. "You were the only one we found alive," he said. "There were 4 others aboard. We recovered them. They were past the window, long past. You were 11 hours in, and you should have been past it too, and you were not, because your body had already begun to do the thing it does. It had slowed you, cooled you, closed what it could, held you at the edge for 11 hours in a hulled compartment on nothing, because your body does not know when to quit even when the person might have wanted to." He made himself say the rest. "You survived because you are what you are. The others were not, and so they did not. I am sorry. I have been sorry since the intake. It is the one line I could not put in your column because your body did not do it. Your body did the opposite of it. Your body kept you when there was no reason left to be kept. She took it the way she took everything. She considered it." Neff watched her consider it, watched the quiet hold, watched a young woman from a world of hard machinery receive the fact that she alone had walked out of a wreck that took 4 others, and he watched her not break, not because she did not feel it. He had learned by now that the flatness was not absence, but because breaking was a thing you did later, alone, and not in a sealed hall in front of the people who had spent 5 days deciding whether to kill you. "Their names are in your intake," she said. "The 4, you have their names." "We have their names." "Then that's a column too," she said. "Isn't it? That's how you think everything's a column. Somebody made them what they were, and it's written down." She picked the stylus back up, and Neff did not understand what she meant to do until she did it. She asked him, quietly, to open the 4 intake records, the recovery logs of the 4 she had not been able to save, and when he opened them she found on each the line the wardship wrote for a body past the window, the flat notation of a recovery that came to nothing, unsigned because no hand had done anything, a life ended by physics and logged by no one. And Reese Calloway, conductor of her own graft, holder of the oldest instrument of the concordance, signed each of the four, not to claim she had made them, to claim she had known them. "Where I'm from," she said, "when you can't save somebody, you still sign for them. You put your name down that they were real and they were yours and you were there. You don't leave the line blank." She signed the fourth. "Now they're not blank." Neff logged that, and the ring saw it, and later, long after, when the case had become the thing the concordance argued about for a generation, it was that, as much as the lungs or the quietus, that changed how the Illith spoke of the null-conductor world. Because a body conducting itself was a fact, and facts could be filed and feared and legislated. But a conductor who took the oldest instrument of another people and used it, unbidden, to sign that four strangers had been real and hers and not left blank, that was not a fact. That was a thing the Illith had no register for, and it went into the column of the case as observed only, and it was never signed because no one could honestly say they understood it, and Vesuth would not put a hand to a thing she did not understand, not even a true one. They released her on the 9th day. There was no ceremony, because Reese Calloway had made it plain across 5 days that she had no use for ceremony, and because the ring was not in a mood for it. The ring was in the long, quiet reckoning of a body of physicians that had come, by 2 seats, within an afternoon of silencing a conductor, and would spend a generation on what that meant. Aloon signed the release himself. He came down from the ring one last time, and stood at the cradle where the human sat. Well now, more than well. A small scarred woman with new lungs and corrected bone, and a cold response she could finish or shelve at will, breathing the station's thin air like a summit she had grown used to. And he looked at her for a while with the pale old eyes that had spent 60 years being the safest hand in every room, and had learned in 9 days that safety was a smaller thing than he had thought. "I came down here to catch the oldest fear my people own," Aloon said. "I have caught it 100 times and I was never wrong. I was wrong about you before I ever read your plate in the lift on the way down because I had already decided what you were, and everything true you did after that I read through the wrong word for 4 days. He inclined his head, a gesture Neff had never seen an overwarden make to a client. "You corrected the warden's conduction against an anatomy she did not have. You read your own supply chain faster than the ring. You walled off my channel and took it apart. You told the sealed Cantory's oldest hand to stand back, in plain words, and she did not listen, and you were right. And then you signed for 4 strangers so they would not be blank. I am 90 years in the ring and I have never met a hand like yours, and the thing that shames me is not that I tried to stop you. It is that I could not, at first, see that stopping you was the same as stopping a colleague. You were a conductor from the 9th minute. We simply could not read a conductor without a stole." "You don't have to make a speech," Reese Calloway said, not unkindly. "You reached into me to help and then you reached in to stop me and then you figured out I didn't need stopping and you turned around. That's more than most would do. Most would have kept reaching." She stood off the cradle easily on legs that had been crushed 9 days before. "I'm not angry. I keep waiting to feel angry because a bunch of you spent a week deciding whether to kill me, but I'm not. You were scared. You were scared of the exact right thing, a body that won't stop, and I happen to be a body that stops. You just never met one before." She looked around the hall at Vesuth, at Neff, at the diminished figure of Renew who had insisted, over the reconstruction's objection, on being present at the release. "You built all of this because your bodies would kill you if you trusted them. That's not weakness. That's the opposite. You're the ones who did the hard thing. I got handed a body that runs itself and I've spent my whole life not thinking about it. You got handed bodies that don't and you built a whole civilization to carry them, cell by hand, for 11,000 years, and you never dropped one until you were forced to." She shrugged, the shoulders carrying the meaning. From where I'm standing, you're the impressive ones. I just clenched my fist. No one answered that for a while. It was Renew who answered it. In the end, in the voice that still came a strand at a time, the old physician of the sealed cantery, who had been closest to the human's body and paid for it, and would carry the diminishment to the grave. We will have to reclassify your world, Renew said. The catalog has a register for every kind of life we have met, ordered by how much conduction it requires to hold itself together. Yours requires none. It conducts itself, every body from birth, without a hand, and it does not consume itself, because it knows when it is done. There has never been a register for that because we believed there could be no such world. The warden named it in the first hour before she knew what she was naming. Register 0, a null conductor world. The node flickered. Do you understand what that means to us? We built the whole of our medicine, our law, our theology on the belief that a body left to itself is death. It is true. It is true of every body we ever met. And it is not true of you, and it was never true of your whole world, and now every illith who ever silenced an unhanded thing, and I have silenced more than any of them, has to hold two facts at once: that we were right to fear the thing that grows without a hand, and that the thing that grows without a hand can also be a person who signs for the dead so they are not blank. Both. Forever. That is the gift you are leaving us. It is a terrible gift. I would not give it back. Reese Calloway looked at the old, diminished physician for a long moment. Stand back next time, she said. That's all. When you're scared of a thing and you can't tell what it is, stand back and watch it a while before you reach in. It'll show you what it is if you let it. She almost smiled at Renew, and this time she came closer to it than she ever had because Renew was no longer only frightened. Renew was something else now, changed, and Reese Calloway had never had any quarrel with the changed. I told you that on the first day. It was the only useful thing I had. It still is. They gave her passage on the next hauler bound for a lane her registry ran, because a conductor did not stay quarantined, and there was nothing left to quarantine, and because Reese Calloway wanted to go back to work, which was the most human thing about her, Neff thought, and the thing he understood least, that a woman who had just become the strangest medical fact in 11,000 years wanted, more than anything the ring could offer her, to get back on a hauler and work the salvage lanes. Because that was what she did, and being what she was had never once, to her, been a thing worth stopping for. Neff walked her to the transit ring himself. Vesuth had asked that it be him, again, the junior, the one who had read her from the 9th minute, and Neff understood by now that Vesuth gave him these things not as burdens, but as the only true education the cantery had left to offer, which was the education of standing next to the thing you could not conduct and learning what it was. They're going to study you for 100 years, he told her at the lock. You know that, the column, the recordings, what you are. There will be illith not yet born who learn medicine by reading your 5 days on this station. Let them, she said. Maybe some of them figure out how to make a fist. She looked at him, the small scarred deckhand with new lungs, about to step back onto a hauler and disappear into the lanes. You did all right, you know, the young one who wouldn't stop reading the machine. You were the only one who believed the machine before you believed the story you'd been told your whole life. That's not nothing. That's most of the whole thing, actually, believing the reading over the story. She stepped into the lock. Keep doing that. It's the only part of what I did that you can learn. Reese Calloway, Neff said, because he wanted once to say the whole of her name to her, the intake name, the registry name, the name at the top of the whitest column in the concordance. What do we call your world? In the catalog, register 0 is a number. A loon says a world should have a name and a number both. What do we call it? She thought about it, the way she thought about everything. You call it home, she said. Everybody's world is just home to the people on it. There's nothing special about ours from the inside. We get sick and we get hurt and we die same as anybody. We just handle it mostly without thinking about it, because the body does the handling and you don't have to sign for it. She almost smiled a last time and let it go, because Reese Calloway did not smile at people who were about to miss her, and Neff was about to miss her, and she knew it. From your side it probably looks like a whole world of bodies that run themselves and stop when they're done. I get that it looks like a lot, but you should put in the catalog that it doesn't feel like a lot from the inside. It just feels like Tuesday. The lock began to cycle. That's the part you'll never read off a plate. It's ordinary. The whole terrifying thing is completely ordinary. Write that down. The lock closed. The hauler took her, and Neff stood at the transit ring with the plate cold in his hands and watched a small, unremarkable vessel fold out toward the salvage lanes, carrying the strangest fact his species had ever met, who had told him on the way out the door that the fact was ordinary and had meant it and had been right. He went back to the hall. Vesuth was there, at the empty cradle, with the human's column unrolled above it, white from top to bottom, 111 sign lines and 4 more beneath them signed for the dead. And Neff came and stood beside her, and the two of them looked at it for a long while in the sound of the hall, the cord and the pumps, and the soft machinery of a place built to hold the dying still, while other bodies decided what they would become. We put the good clay into the wrong world's child, Neff said, and the child was a potter. You remembered that. I've thought about it every hour since you said it. It was wrong, Vesuth said. The way I said it as a horror that first day. The good clay wasted on a body that would not be conducted. She reached up and touched the white column, the way she touched a client, gently, a hand reading a thing it could not conduct. But that is not what happened. We did not waste the clay. We put the finest medium in the reserve into the hands of the only creature in 11,000 years who could be trusted to use it without us, and she used it better than any of us would have, and then she signed for it, and then she signed for 4 strangers so they would not be blank, and then she got on a hauler and went back to work because to her none of it was a horror or a miracle. It was Tuesday. Vesuth lowered her hand. We were not the potters, Neff. We never were. We were the ones who had to build a wheel and a kiln and a guild and a book, because our clay would not hold a shape unless a hand held it every moment. And we came to believe that the wheel was the world, that there was no other way to make a pot, that a lump of clay left alone could only slump. And then a child from a world we had no register for picked up the clay in her 2 hands, without a wheel, without a book, without a single one of us, and made a pot and knew when it was finished and set it down. The hall was quiet. The ring will spend 100 years on her, Vesuth said, and they will get the medicine of it in time. They will learn what a self-handed body is, and they will learn the pathways she built, and some of them, the good ones, the ones like you, will even learn the thing that matters, which is to believe the reading over the story. She looked at Neff. But they will not learn the last thing, the thing she told you at the lock, that it is ordinary. That the whole terrifying fact of her, the thing that split the ring and diminished Renew and cost us 11,000 years of certainty, is from the inside the most ordinary thing there is, a body that handles what comes and stops when it's done, on a world full of bodies that do the same, where no one has ever once had to sign for their own breathing. She turned back to the white column. We will never read that off a plate. It is not a fact. It is a whole way of being alive that we were never offered, and she carried it through our hall for 9 days without once understanding that it was the rarest thing in it, because to her it was not rare. It was just Tuesday. And that, in the end, is the thing I will not sign, because I do not understand it, and I never will, and I am old enough now to know the difference between a thing I do not understand and a thing that is not true. She left the column open. Neff stayed a while after she had gone, at the empty cradle in the sound of the hall, and looked at the whitest column in the concordance, and thought about a small scarred woman folding out toward the salvage lanes on a hauler, going back to work, breathing thin air like a summit she had grown used to, a conductor who did not know she was a conductor, a potter who did not know there was any other way to make a pot. He did not close the column. He left it open, white from top to bottom, 111 lines she had signed for herself, and 4 she had signed for the dead. the honest record of a body that had made itself while a civilization argued about whether it was allowed to, and then had put its own name to the making, and then had gone home, because home was just the place the people were, and there was nothing special about it from the inside. He believed the reading over the story. It was, she had told him, most of the whole thing,